Provincial police arrived at dawn, secured their position, and gave the Mohawk until 8 to clear out. But the natives stood their ground. The battle for the barricade started just before 9 o'clock. On one side, heavily armed provincial police lobbed tear gas and stun grenades. The Mohawks responded with automatic firepower. A 20-minute gun battle ensued. Dozens of rounds of ammunition were shot off, and then the inevitable. Someone was hit. A police officer took a bullet in the face, which proved fatal. That seemed to turn the tide. The police who had been advancing until then turned tail and fled, leaving 6 of their vehicles behind.
At one point, there were as many as 12 native barricades in Quebec, but tonight only one is still standing. It's the one that triggered the whole dispute, the one that Quebec police tried to storm 53 days ago, the one in Oka. Mohawks erected that barricade last March. They were trying to prevent the town from expanding a 9-hole golf course on what they claim is ancestral land. Tonight, the barricade is completely surrounded by the Canadian Army. The soldiers have dug themselves in after a day of high tension and drama.
The infantry major in charge made it clear he was heading for the barricades at any cost and that bullets would be met with bullets.
As soon as I'm able to move forward, I move forward.
Are you moving right through to the barricades?
There's a barricade down there? Yes, sir.
They continued to advance relentlessly throughout the day, and by evening they were here in the very center of the Kanesatake encampment. They were at the edge of the sacred Mohawk cemetery and near the very spot where the Quebec police officer was killed weeks ago. They were also within about a 1-minute march from the main Indian barricade.
Restez calme, bougez pas, pointez pas d'armes.
And the soldiers followed the methods they'd followed all along, telling the Mohawks not to shoot first or they would shoot back.
Sego, I'm John Kane, and this is Let's Talk Native. Today's show is 78 Days in the Pines. We talked to 2 friends who were major figures in what is too often called the Oka Crisis, but was really an assault on Mohawk people at Kanesatake. With this episode, we are introducing a new format to LTN. We will shift from doing 3 podcasts per week to 1 produced program providing a deeper examination on a given topic. My guests today are Kahentinetha Horn and Loran Thompson, who I know as Kanesatake. Let me start by explaining that the events we are discussing take place in Kanesatake, a small, quiet, picturesque community on the shores of the Lake of Two Mountains west of Montreal, where 2 rivers converge with the St. Lawrence. The Mohawk communities of Kahnawake and Akwesasne are also mentioned, and much of the support for Kanesatake came from those communities. Before I get into it, let me also explain a few things. Throughout this episode, you will hear Kahentinetha and Loran referred to the men. By that, they are referring to the warriors or the warrior society, known in the language as Rodi Skarfaget. We discuss more about the warrior societies in episodes 514 and 515 featuring the Garundage. If you want to learn more, you can check those out. Let me explain the lay of the land a little bit before we get into the interview. Kahnawake is right on the St. Lawrence River with a major bridge and access to Montreal. Kanesatake is almost due north of Kahnawake, not far as a crow flies, but a long drive due to the waterways. A small ferry is the shortest way, but it's still an hour-long trip. Akwesasne is west of Kahnawake and is also on the St. Lawrence, but straddles the international border between the United States and Canada. When the media refers to the Oka Crisis, what they're referring to is the 78-day siege that begins on July 11th, 1990, with a shootout between the Quebec provincial police and the Mohawk warriors. The provincial police, known as the SQ, were attempting to remove a blockade manned by Mohawk warriors to prevent the mayor of the municipality of Oka from expanding a golf course onto Mohawk land, which is part of Kanesatake. The blockade had been in place for over a year, and the conflict had been brewing for all that time. Those tensions between the French Canadians, who are the main population of Oka and the region, and the Mohawk people are historic, and those racial tensions lie at the foundation of this conflict. My first guest addresses some of these issues, so let me go ahead and introduce Kahentinetha Horn. Kahentinetha is from Kahnawake and has been very active in Native struggles for over 60 years. She was in Kanesatake supporting the blockade and would be a part of the men and women holed up in the treatment center throughout the siege. Kahentinetha, why don't you give me your thoughts on the racial tensions between the Native and non-Native people of that area?
Well, the municipality is French, and they have very little to do with the natives who are right there. And so there's always been animosity between us and the French, and that goes right back to the very beginning. Our original relationship with them was never very good, and we fought them for a long time, 100 years. So that was the kind of that's what was going on. There was always that that dynamic was always there. But the Mohawks always, I have to say, we stayed true to each other. We had our arguments, yes, but we always stayed true to each other, and we fought and helped each other throughout. So when what came up in 1990, when that happened, well, it didn't take but a few seconds for the Onondaga to rise up and go and help. And they were there within a very short time. And they were fighting for this land that the Oka people wanted, which was a golf course. And there's a golf course that had been there for a while. It's been there since the 50s. And so they wanted to increase the size of the parking lot and probably increase the size of the golf course, the golf club. Anyway, the people there said, no, you're not going to do that. And it was right, the land they wanted to increase was the cemetery, our cemetery, our native cemetery. And they said, no, you're not going to do that. No. So that led into the SQ coming in and firing at them. And it was a it was a huge attack. And anyway, they came in and they were firing at them, and then there was a big battle there. And then the SQ backed off because one of their guys was killed. They blamed us for it at first. They said we shot and killed him, but we didn't. That was Marcelle. They will never admit who shot him. They just, all the guns that they could find around there disappeared, and all the trees that had been fired at were taken down. So, they were trying to make sure that none of their people ever got blamed for that. But it wasn't us. That's for sure.
Let's back up a little bit, because I know once the municipality and the mayor of Oka was trying to expand this golf course, this conflict kind of raged on for quite some time. And if you can back up, give a sense for how our people responded, because I know they called the area the Pines, and you talked about them taking the trees down to hide the evidence of their gunshots. But to the best that you can, explain how long there had been this standoff before the SQ actually came in the way they did. Well,
from the times that I went there and was involved with some of the meetings, I would say it was myself. I was involved with it maybe about a year. But I never expected that they would charge in the way they did. Nobody expected that. We just weren't going to give in. And that was the stand that was being taken by everybody. And that's why our people were there. They said, no, we're not moving. We're not leaving. We're staying. But the mayor of Oka wanted to develop his municipality because, fancy houses were being put up and estates and so on. So he wanted a nice big resort type of area there so that they could play golf and go sailing and that kind of stuff. And so we saw that they wanted to do that over a long period of time. But I'll tell you something else. In the 1950s, I think it was 1959, was the first time they put up that golf club. And I remember we protested then in 1959. And I remember helping to organize a jamboree. And we had people from here, from Kahentinetha, from Aguzasne, from there. We all got together and we had a jamboree with speeches and so on. We already said in 1959 that, and they went ahead and they did build the small one. But they wanted a big one, and they wanted to build it right over to where the cemetery was. And we said no, and we had a big, so we took a stand at that time. So they knew that they would have a problem. Right from 1959, they knew that.
But now this conflict basically lasted for almost a year. And I know runners from Kanesatake came down to Onondaga at Grand Councils to talk about the circumstance. And I don't know if you could get into that a little bit, but also, again, the way this thing, the standoff basically came to an end when the SQ launched their violent attack.
Well, there were a lot of things going on, and there were a lot of different parties that were going to Onondaga and going to the other communities. This was going on for quite a while, yes. However, we all didn't know what everybody was doing. We just knew that there was a big issue, and something had happened in Agosasne. There was that had been taken over, and there were about 1,000 policemen from New York State in there, and so that. But the only place where it was kind of relatively quiet was here in Kahnawake. So things were already going on, and things were already happening to us, and we were already being threatened. And so this kind of blew up suddenly, and then everything came down over in Kanesatake. And then we all had to, everybody had to rush over to Kanesatake to stand with them.
And one of those people who rushed to Kanesatake is my friend Loran Thompson.
Is this Mr. John Kane?
Is this Kanesatake? Loran, who I know as Kanesatake, has always been a big part of the Longhouse community in Akwesasne and Kahnawake. He has served on council and is well respected throughout Haudenosaunee or Haudenosaunee lands. Now, Loran, Kenneth Deere from the Mohawk Nation office called upon you, but you're from Akwesasne. And from a geographical standpoint, that's quite a ways from Kanesatake. So how did you get involved?
Well, I was in Kahnawake at the time. I was living in Kahnawake. And I was maybe 100 feet from what was the nation office at that time in old Kahnawake. And the morning they went into Kanesatake, I had got a phone call from the nation office, who happened to be Kenneth Deere, and he tells me, he says, you have your TV on? I says, no. He says, turn it on and put it on the news channel. He says, watch the news and come on over here as soon as you see it.
Quebec riot police are now moving in on a roadblock set up by Mohawk Indians in Oka, Quebec. Our reporter, Loran Levine, has managed to reach the Mohawk barricade, and he's joining us where just moments ago shots were fired, and he spoke with Barbara Smith.
Laurent, the support for this particular roadblock at Oka, what is happening there?
You can hear firing. I'm not sure if it's weapons or if it's, yes it is, they're firing at us. I can see, I'm trying to get behind a tree actually, and the tear gas is starting to come. But as you can hear, there's semi-automatic weapon fire. And
now, is this police firing or Mohawk firing?
Appears to be. I can't tell for sure where it's coming from, but it appears to be coming from the police lines, yes. They're not firing at people, but they're firing on the ground, and we'll move back because the tear gas.
When I watched it, I walked over, and Kenneth and the nation office people talked to me, and so what do you think, and so on and so forth, and they said, well, what we're going to do is put a team together to go there and to try to resolve the issue peacefully. So they says, okay, we want you to go on that committee, and your job would be to help resolve this issue peacefully. I says, okay. So they put us on a bus and we went there, and they came to Akwesasne. Kanesatake came to Akwesasne asking for help. And I was not totally aware at that time that they had done that. But apparently, Francis Boots, the war chief at the time here in Okazusna, got a few men and they went up there. And they had been there about a week or so. On that morning that the police came in, they were all there, okay? They were all there in the pines, burning tobacco in the morning, doing the sunrise ceremony. When the police came in the way they did, shooting and gassing everybody and so on. Well, the men that were already there, once the shots went off, they didn't waste any time in opening fire back at the SQ.
A 20-minute gun battle ensued. Dozens of rounds of ammunition were shot off, and then the inevitable. Someone was hit. A police officer took a bullet in the face, which proved fatal. That seemed to turn the tide. The police who had been advancing until then turned tail and fled, leaving 6 of their vehicles behind.
And at that moment, everybody on the SQ side just turned around and ran back out of the woods and left their vehicles and everything behind. They all ran down the hill. And that's when the men started up the payloader and pushed their vehicles across the road to keep them from coming back up the road. It was the SQ that did all of this. Okay, they tried their best to aggravate the situation because they were going to push their way through, but they got pushed back and stopped. And during that process, information was coming out to the public and it was coming out live because the reporters were also stuck inside. They were not allowed to leave, and no reporters were allowed to come in. So they had a direct information, a direct line to what was actually happening. And that went right out to international news, national and international news.
News Watch with Dennis Trudeau.
Hello. Mohawk versus police with their guns aimed at each other and one Quebec police force officer dead. That's the situation tonight at 2 native communities in the Montreal area. In Oka, the Mohawk sees several police...
So the whole world saw what actually happened on that morning, how Kanesatake was attacked, and they defended themselves. So everything was proper in the way they defended themselves on the threat that was coming at them. They tried to blame the warriors for doing it, but it never went further than that. They couldn't prove anything.
Corporal Marcelle was rushed to Saint-Eustache Hospital at around 9:15. When he arrived, he was suffering from cardiac arrest. Hospital officials tried to resuscitate him, but at 10:15, some 45 minutes later, he died. Lemay was a member of the provincial police SWAT team. He was one of the officers sent to Oka to dismantle the Mohawk barricade. Mohawks say they didn't shoot him during the gun battle.
It was an accident. There was no one at fault. The policeman apparently climbed up a tree, slipped, fell, shot himself right there. He was transported to Saint-Eustache Hospital.
The Quebec police force refused to confirm or deny the Mohawks' claim. They simply said they're investigating Lemay.
Anyway, we sat down. We all sat down. Everything was going good, talking. Everybody's agreeing, and we came to the point where now the dialogue is going to go between us to do the fine-tuning. The agreements are going to be signed, and then all of a sudden, at the end of the table, right where I was standing, there was an empty seat, which I wasn't aware that the men had decided that a warrior that was there was going to sit there. Well, he went through the whole process and that seat was empty. But when it came towards the end, all of a sudden he sat down there, and it changed the whole scene that was going on, because he's in camo. He's got a camo hat on. He's got a handkerchief over his face, which was what was happening at the time. All of the men had their face covered. Now he sat down there, which discredited the whole thing. All of that stuff that took place from there on, because that one person sat there, he ruined the peaceful political process that was taking place.
No,
and
but why was that?
A military.
Why was that? Why was that?
Because the other side was not made aware. Neither side was made aware that the warriors were going to be involved politically in this whole process. It was political representatives from both sides.
Mm.
Is what it started out as. So to the Canadian politicians, representatives, because that happened, everything just fell apart. And when they left, that's when the SQ and the RCMP start moving in to Kanesatake. Start moving in. Kanesatake held their own because those reporters were there to report exactly what was happening every day. The helicopters, the SQ, how they were agitating everybody. People that were living there in Kanesatake were being agitated right there at the roadblocks, and a whole lot of things were going on by the SQ. And Oka Mayor was not going to get what he wanted. So when the Oka Mayor and the Quebec government start moving, it was them that made all of the issues more difficult. They called the military and what the heck they called, they got one, what is it, brigade, I think they called it in Quebec. And they surrounded Kanesatake and they start moving in. They start closing us off slowly and slowly. And this was all on world news at that time, okay? It was really getting out there.
Instead of moving on the Oka barricades by road, the Army chose the terrain it likes best, the forest, moving in from behind, coming in the back way. When they rolled, it was swift. The warriors met them on a dirt road deep inside the Indian territory.
They were flying over with helicopters constantly. They had their military vehicles parked all the way around the encampment, and they were taking turns starting their engines at nighttime so that the people inside would not be able to sleep and they would be too tired to negotiate.
Weren't there multiple times where, the Canadian officials walked away from the table? Were you involved in some of the other subsequent negotiations?
No. What actually happened there during the process, the military was closing in. What happened is our lines in the Onondaga Grand Council got together with the SWAT, Six Nations, and they had meetings with Department of Indian Affairs Canada and the Canadian government, okay? And their resolve to that issue was for Canada to put up an office, an embassy for the Iroquois Confederacy in Ottawa at their expense. And they would give the okay for the Canadian Army to go and get rid of the warriors once and for all. That's what their deal was. Because they wanted to get rid of the warriors at that time, if you remember, because they were enforcing our rights and keeping our people safe and all of that stuff. So as things closed, a negotiating team from our side sprung up in Dorval. Okay. They start negotiating with the military in charge. Then they came up with an idea. The military set up 2 tents, and they were going to come out in a certain manner and go through a certain process. Okay? And when we got the message that we were okay, there's an agreement in place, come on out. So everybody was all happy, it's gonna be all over now and so on. So they had a meeting inside. How are we gonna dress? We're gonna dress like this, or we're gonna civilian. So, well, I chose civilian. I says, listen, we don't know what we're going into here. I says, wear civilian clothes, they won't recognize who you are, or so on and so forth, and they won't come after you.
So, Loran, you were in the treatment center. You were in the treatment center this whole time with the folks that were holed up. Then.
Yes. The whole time I was in the treatment. Yeah. Yes, and the decision was made to each his own. Wear what you like. Okay. So that's when we got the phone call. So from Dorval, they asked for me. I went up there, and they called a phone that belonged to one of the photographers that was locked in Kanesatake. When I got there at the tarp, which is the only place that you could get a signal, okay? So I talked to him, and I talked to Mike Myers. And Mike Myers said, don't listen to what's going on. It's a double cross. It's a double cross. Don't do it. So I says, okay. I hung up. I turned around, and now they're marching down. They're all singing. And I told one of the men, I said, pick up all of those gurneys that are laying around. I said, pick them up, and let's go tell them we can't go out. I said, that would be a surrender. They wanted us to go out with our hands behind our head, go through the first tent. They would frisk us down, go through the second tent, get processed, and then taken to a military jail or whatever. We walked out to them, and we stopped them. Everything stopped. I explained everything to them. I told them, I says, we got to go out this way, through the woods. I says, we are all leaving, but we can't go out the way they want us to, because that would be a surrender. So we got to go through the woods. And after I said that, everything was just quiet. And then all of a sudden, the whole line turned and went through the woods.
So as we see, as the conflict was coming to an end, there was much confusion and uncertainty. On top of that, Kahentinetha's daughters showed up in this chaotic scenario.
And then my 2 daughters showed up. They came by boat. They showed up. And I told them they had to leave. They had to go back. It's too dangerous here. So I was looking for them. I couldn't find them, and we were trying to get people out. Anyway, we couldn't find them, and they were hiding. They wanted to stay with their mom. Anyway, I was pretty angry. But anyway, so we had to take care of them. We had other children there, too, and we had to look after them. It was very, very dangerous time. Yes, it was.
How old were your daughters?
Constantly. Well, my youngest daughter was 4, and my other daughter was 14.
Now, at this point, Loran knows that the planned exit is a double cross. So both Loran and Kahentinetha, with her daughters, change course. They use gurneys that are lying there to cross the barbed wire to leave through the woods.
We suddenly made a right turn and headed right for where there was a lot of people. Our people were there, and there were a lot of press, media. They were all there, and we just put those stretchers over the fence, and we just started running over. We were grabbing everybody.
As people were coming through, I was standing there, and one woman comes through with a baby. So I helped across the gurney, and I says, whatever you do, do not run. Don't run. I says, go to the second driveway through the yards and walk. Meanwhile, just behind us, the military had come out from the, whatever they call where they assembled. They were all coming from there anyways. And they start stopping the ones that had their fatigues on. They start fighting with them. And this one woman seen me wrestling with one military guy who was trying to stop me from moving. Well, anyways, when she saw that, she come running over there. She grabbed that guy right off of me and threw him in the back. And she says, you, get out of here. Leave right now. And there was a guy from up with us and that heard that. And he ran after his car, which was parked pretty darn close to where the ruckus was going on at that time with the military. So he ran after that, and by the time I turned around and started to leave, that military guy was right there again, and we were at it again, and that woman again grabbed him and threw him. Holy man, I don't know where she got her strength from, but she grabbed him by the flak jacket, swung him around, and pushed him out of the way. And she told me again, get the hell out of here. She says, go on. So I start walking out to the sidewalk. As I turned, that person that was beside us had gotten his car, and he was riding right there. And we jumped in, and when we left, a bunch of little things happened, but I made it home about an hour, 10, 15 minutes. I was home, but I didn't stay here at home. I stayed at another place because now they were looking for me.
So at this point, while Loran has escaped, Kahentinetha and her daughters are with the group that are being attacked by the soldiers.
The soldiers were pretty angry. They came running around from the other end, and they grabbed Lasagna and started beating him up. And then me and somebody else, we jumped on the soldiers, tried to get them off. But they were really beating him up badly. And then my daughter was leading the kids in, and she was supposed to get them to where the crowd of our people were. And they stopped her, and that's when they stabbed her in the chest, right over the heart. It just missed her heart. And then I went in, and I started screaming and screaming. I said, that's my daughter, that's my daughter. And she was holding on to my other daughter, my 4-year-old. And then the soldier put the knife right to my chest, and he says, back off, lady. Back off. Well, so I backed off. And then I think somebody else grabbed my 2 girls, pulled them out, and then I grabbed them. And so that's when that happened. But at that moment, there was a lot of fighting going on, a lot of it. So it was hard to know what was going on. We were all just trying to grab our kids, trying to get ourselves over to our own people. And we ended up being put in these buses. They were military buses. And just before I got in, I was holding on to my little girl, and we were looking after my daughter. We didn't know how badly she'd been hurt. So we all got on that bus, and we were taken to a military camp. And we were left in the bus in the middle of the tarmac. And my daughter, then we saw how badly my daughter had been hurt. She was bleeding everywhere, and we couldn't get any medical help for her, and they wouldn't let us go to the bathroom. And that bus was full of the women and the babies and the children. And we were trying to get some help for us, and nobody would give us any help. And then finally, some lawyers showed up, and they said, "We're going to help you." So then, so they allowed us to go to the bathroom, and then they took us, and then he saw what happened to my daughter, and he said, "Well, we have to get her out of here." And we did get her out. Pretty tricky. We were very tricky, but we got her out. They had us in this trailer, and they were filling forms out, and she was there, and we couldn't get any help for her. And this lawyer says, "When I tell you, bring her out, I'll have a car here." And this was inside the compound. So anyway, he opened the door, he said, "Get in," and he told him, "Whatever you do, just drive right through and don't stop." So he drove, and he went right through the crowd. There must have been 500 people there at the gate of the compound. He got her out of there and brought her back to Kahnawake and took her immediately to the hospital.
So so essentially you were able to break your daughter, and this is Wanique?
Yes.
You were able to break your daughter out from their custody so you could make sure that she got the medical attention. They didn't provide it. You basically had to bust her out of their custody?
Yes, I did.
So all this was happening. This was under the SQ's custody or the military's custody?
When we were in the military at Farnham, it was the SQ that was interrogating us. They took us each by ourselves, 2 of them, and they would start interrogating us. And nobody said anything. We just said, "I have no comment." That's it. No comment, no comment, no comment. And they got very angry at us. And then they wouldn't let us sleep. We were in these barracks, and they were banging on the floor. If our eyes just closed, they did everything they could to keep us awake. And then they would take us one at a time, and they would take us in to be interrogated.
Kahentinetha, I want to thank you so much for giving me so much of your time. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you for the work you did in 1990, but also for giving me your time today. I greatly appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad to do it. I really am.
Just to give an update on Kahentinetha's daughters, 14-year-old Wanique would survive her injuries and go on to earn a gold medal in the 1999 Pan American Games in water polo. She would be only the second woman from Kahnawake to compete in the Olympics. 4-year-old Gonyadio would go on to become a very successful actress, earning a Gemini Award nomination. If you'd like to learn more about Kahentinetha, Gonyadio hosts a popular podcast with her mother called Coffee with My Ma. Let me get back to Loran for some final thoughts looking back from all these years later. How would you frame the legacy of Kanesatake, Oka, our resistance? How would you characterize the aftermath and the legacy of that conflict?
It reinitiated the subconscious of a lot of our people, both U.S. and Canada, and other areas of the world. Indigenous people all over were re-energized by what they seen and heard in Kanesatake. what we're seeing right now throughout Canada and on the pipeline issue, they're trying to keep the unity in place that had developed during that time. To use the media and the internet to educate the people out there on what's going on, which is really important.
Today, many of the people who are involved in the conflicts, the defense, or the resistance to Canadian law, U.S. law, development, governance, they're very young. Some of these people weren't even born during in 1990, and many of them were babies or children. So, is it your sense that all of the people who are now involved in many of these conflicts are still recalling so much of what was represented by this conflict in Kanesatake and Oka?
Yes, it keeps coming up. You hear in a lot of people, a lot of young people that are on the lines today. We don't want another Oka. We don't want a military situation again. We got to be careful in what we say and do, but we have to defend. We have to defend ourselves intelligently.
I guess the question is, would the resistance we see today, do you think that it would exist in the same way had that resistance not occurred in 1990?
That's hard to say because you already had, was it San Francisco?
Alcatraz and...
Alcatraz. You've already had Alcatraz. Wounded Knee. You've already had Ganyonga. You had Ganyonga. You already had the Civil War, Nakwazasne. All of these political things were happening all over the time. Regardless if you're on one side or the other, you were hearing who and what we are as a people and what our responsibilities are as a people. And we often hear we're treaty people. We made treaties with the newcomers to this land. We didn't get our rights from a treaty. We gave rights to who we made the treaty with. So our rights have always been here. I think people are coming around and starting to realize that.
Loran, talk about the golf course and its expansion plans.
Well, right now they're starting it again, okay? But it's a developer this time, an apartment developer. Wants to go to Kanesatake in the same area that is owned by Kanesatake people. Oka wants to give the developer an okay to put up apartment houses or something to that effect.
Even though the golf course never expanded, there still seems to be some designs on trying to build luxury condos or some other form of development on that.
Yeah, because they see all of this land, pines. It's all pines. They see all of that as useless, but our people see it as oxygen. That's their oxygen.
Thank you for taking this journey with us. As always, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Let's Talk Native. You can find us on Twitter at Let's Talk Native. You can also follow us on Instagram at Let's Talk Native TV. And of course, you can join our group page on Facebook. This is John Kane, and this is Let's Talk Native. Yahweh.
They're crazy. I think because of a few people that initiated this whole thing. I mean the non-Indians that initiated this project of a golf course and then trying to take the land away. Because it's Mohawk land, it's our land. There's a little bit left. They're sucking the marrow out of our bones. That's obviously what they all want. They want everything.
What do you think of the provincial police's attempt this morning to take this barricade?
Foolish. Foolish, because they're ready to kill us.